Hey, everybody. Just wanted to welcome you to our virtual remembrance today for our good friend and colleague, Eula Bingham. What we've tried to do is assemble some folks who will give you some reminiscences and some stories and some really good reflections on the lifelong work that Eula did that affected us and changed our lives in so many ways. And her as an important friend, colleague, and really historical figure. So what I wanted to try to do, and what we're going to try to do, is I tried to recruit a group of different people who had things that they want to say, who contacted me. And then we'll try to run through the agenda. We're going to try to do it in a 2 to 3 to 5 minute way to make sure that we give an opportunity for everybody to speak who wants to speak. And what we're going to do is we'll be dinging a bell or a gong, and after a few minutes, I think 3 minutes, and then be able to move on to the next speaker. We have a couple of kind of exciting innovations also. Mark Catlin, who's on the agenda, is going to be webcasting a speech that Eula gave. We also have been joined by Earl Dotter, so his images will also be being played. But if anybody else wants to share while you speak, let us know if you want to share a picture or an image as well. So without further ado, I'm Chip Hughes. I work for NIHS, Worker Training Program. I first met Eula, I believe, in 1978, and I'll talk about that later. But I want to first turn it over to my co-hosts, Carol Rice and Phil Landrigan, to do their welcomes and to talk a little bit about their reflections. So Carrie, you want to turn it over to Carol and Phil next?
Carol, you can unmute, and Phil, you can unmute when you're ready.
Carol, why don't you go ahead and start it off?
Okay, thanks. It's wonderful to see so many names that have meant so much to all of us over the years, and certainly meant a lot to Eula. As we continue this program and recount how the winds blow beneath all the many wings that Eula emboldened to fly, I thought it would be appropriate to take a couple of minutes to describe two examples from the legacy that Eula constructed to celebrate the shoulders on which she stood. At Eastern Kentucky University, where she got her undergraduate degree, she established the Arthur and Frida Bingham Prize, a scholarship awarded to a rising sophomore or junior who, not in the pre-med emphasis program, demonstrated outstanding academic performance. The Bingham Prize, in honor of her parents who gave her wings, Arthur and Frida, celebrates the basic science that was the foundation for her toxicology career. While both of her parents were central to her education and love of farming, her father died at an early age. In characterizing her mother's continuing support over the years, in the extensive interview that was published in New Solutions in 2009, Eula noted, "I could never have done what I did without her." At the University of Cincinnati, she established the Barclay, Bell, and Bingham Fund. Bill Barclay worked for many years in her laboratory as a conscientious and trusted research associate. Hayes Bell came to UC to work with Eula as a postdoc. He went on to Kodak Laboratories and also worked with her at Osha. The Barclay, Bell, and Bingham Fund supports travel of a non-faculty member to a meeting to benefit their career development. This underscores a recognition of the important contributions of everyone on a research team and rewards those who rarely have funds, either through research grants or through their own funds, for travel for career development. Eula worked very hard to develop a career when women in science was a very small cadre. In fact, the guys in graduate school nicknamed her, as the only woman, Max, so that she could be one of the boys. As the story goes, she also joined the boys at IARC in smoking a cigar after dinner at the favorite restaurant in Lyon. She did what was needed at the time to push forward an agenda of public health advocacy based on solid science. The Arthur and Frida Bingham Prize and the Barclay Bell and Bingham Fund illustrate an appreciation of roots and colleagues in that journey. These opportunities for those studying or engaged in science is another dimension of the Bingham legacy, providing shoulders for future generations. You're on, Phil. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Well, I'd like to begin by expressing the condolences of the Collegium Ramazzini and all of our fellows to Eula's daughters, to all of her friends and colleagues. Eula served as the second president of the Collegium. She became president in 1992 or 93 after the passing of the Collegium's founder, the late, great Irving Selikoff, and she served with great distinction as our president for one term. And in the 20 plus years that have passed since Eula stepped down as president of the Collegium Ramazzini, she has continued to be an invaluable counselor, a source of wisdom, a source of inspiration, who guides those among us with gray hair and inspires the youngsters among us and brings them up, especially the young women. She's really quite remarkable, and it'll be very, very hard to go back to Italy next year and not have Eula there. She's just been such a fixture every year when we get together in the town of Carpi. So on a personal note, I first met Eula Bingham in the mid-'80s when John Freunds and Tony Robbins persuaded me to come to NIOSH to take over the big field division at NIOSH. And so I was there in Cincinnati with Jim Melius, Bill Halpern, Todd Fraser as my principal colleagues, and Euler across the road, and Osha. And it was really a grand time. We really rocked and rolled. We had the wind behind us. Tony and John gave us everything we needed. We were able to get into any factory where we needed to get into to do inspections. Need a warrant? We got a warrant. Need to get a truck over the mountains to Baltimore to scare the hell out of the Baltimore sun. We put a 53-foot trailer truck with the NIOSH logo in the street in front of them. And Eula was with us all the way. In the years since then, after I left NIOSH and after Eula stepped down as the president of the Collegium Ramazzini, she's just continued to be an invaluable source of wisdom and guidance. As recently as a year and a half, 2 years ago, we must have spent an hour on the telephone, and she gave me incredibly shrewd political guidance about the future of the Collegium Ramazzini. By then, she was having a bit of trouble remembering people's names, but she had no trouble whatsoever in understanding how the pieces fit together and where the road led to the future, that the arc bends ultimately towards justice. So, Eula, thank you.
All right. Mark, I think you're up next.
Mark, we can't hear you.
Okay, has my slide shown up?
No, it's just a black screen.
Yeah, I don't see it.
Did you enable sound also?
I did. Let me try this one more time.
Okay.
Ah.
Beautiful.
There, okay. So I had the great joy in the last decade of working with Eula to gather together video and audio materials from her time at Osha. They did a great job of videotaping and gathering materials. And also she wanted to make sure that was made available to the sort of occupational environmental health community and to the public. And so there's a playlist that we've created of about 20 videos of Eula, in her own words, talking about various issues over the years. I want to play this short video from her very first press conference in 1977, shortly after she was confirmed as the Assistant Secretary. And this is her announcement of OSHA's actions on benzene. So let me, and as Eula would say from when I talked to her, she wanted to speak in her own words through history. And so this is her first effort.
That today the Occupational Safety and Health Administration is taking action that will protect thousands of working men and women who are exposed to benzene on their jobs. We are issuing an emergency temporary standard to reduce worker exposure to this highly toxic substance, which human experience tells us is leukemia causing. There can be no doubt. The evidence is in, and it clearly indicates that we need to reduce the exposure level to this toxic material. We need to protect workers. Although my first major action as Assistant Secretary deals with a specific substance, this is not going to be OSHA's only approach in the future. We plan to issue standards which deal with whole families of chemicals as well as single substances. Finally, I want to join Secretary Marshall in pledging that the Occupational Safety and Health Administration will, as this action I hope demonstrates, begin to focus our attention and our resources on the major serious health hazards that affect thousands of American workers each day. This is only the beginning. There is much more to be done as we strive to fulfill the mandate of the law to assure every American worker a safe and healthy workplace.
Thank you, Dr. Bingham. So I'd like to invite folks to visit this playlist and look at some of the other extensive videos of Eula speaking at press conferences and OSHA conferences and other events over the years. Eula played a big part in my professional life long before I ever met her in 1989. My first two jobs were funded in part with New Directions grants from OSHA, which is a program she started in 1978. And like probably hundreds of us who began our work in occupational safety and health with unions and COSH groups and universities at that time, had it not been for the New Directions grant program, we may not be in these careers and had these wonderful opportunities over the years. So thank you so much, Eula, for that program, and thank you for all your work and for being just a wonderful mentor and colleague.
Great, thank you, Mark. I actually had reached out to Suzanne Major. Are you available, Suzanne? Because I was trying to get somebody from the New Directions program. I'm not sure, Carrie or Deborah, is Suzanne on?
There is a Suzanne, but I'm not sure.
Okay. She said she'd be on, but anyway. If not, I might go to Jim Merchant and come back to Suzanne. Jim, are you available? Oh.
I don't see him on us either.
Okay.
I know Mimi is on.
Then maybe I'll go to myself. And is that okay? Carrie, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, good.
Just put it in presentation mode. And we'll
Yes,
start.
yes. Yeah.
It's hard to log on.
Anyway, if it's okay, I will innovate and move on. I actually, it's funny because Eula gave me this picture probably about, I don't know, 5 years ago. And it was funny because she had wanted me to see on the board in behind, which you can't see, that it says "Cotton Dust Kills." So this was the moment that she signed off on the Cotton Dust Standard, which I know John, if you see John there in the middle, John Freunds, could probably tell me what day that was. But also that's Ray Marshall there on the left, who's the Secretary of Labor. And also just to let people know, I reached out to Jimmy Carter, and I also reached out to Ray Marshall, but wasn't able to get them to join us today. But again, they both send their greetings. But Eula actually, had saved this because she also understood how important the Cotton Dust Standard was in the impact that she had over thousands of people's lives in the textile industry. So for this next segment, I wanted to sort of open up folks who wanted to reminisce about the brown lung cotton dust era of Eula's legacy. And the first person that I wanted to turn it over to is my friend Mimi Conway, who wrote a wonderful book called Rise Gonna Rise, Portrait of Southern Textile Workers. Mimi, I think I'm gonna turn it over to you, and if you would like to introduce what you're gonna say, and go for it.
Thank you, Chip. I think all of us want especially to honor and remember Eula's daughters and granddaughters. And as Chip said, I did write about Dr. Bingham in my book, Rise Gonna Rise, A Portrait of Southern Textile Workers. And in a section called The Fight Goes On, I wrote about her. And this is what it says. On the third, and it's of course also about the Carolina Brown Lung Association. On their third and last morning in Washington, the Carolina Brown Lung Association delegation paid a call on Dr. Eula Bingham, the head of the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. 14 brown lung victims sat at a long conference table that filled the Royal Blue Room. The rest of the 50 Carolina Brown Lung Association members and staff were in chairs against the walls under portraits of 7 secretaries of labor. The past sins of this agency at least were not committed by me, Dr. Bingham said. She looked around the room at the people who had the courage to speak up to judges, senators, and administrators. Sick people who had used their strength to demand that injustice be righted. I need your help, Dr. Bingham said. I need all the help I can get. It is very difficult for me to get people in government to understand that we're talking about a rule or regulation that deals with people. Then she did something that none of the senators or congressmen even came close to. Her eyes filled and her bottom lip quivered. She tried to go on. Some people don't understand that. She was crying and could not go on. In the presence of Dr. Bingham, the pent-up emotions that had been held back during the testifying and the politicking were released. Through her own touched feelings, the woman who headed the government agency responsible for their health shared with these disabled workers the impact of their own lives, the fearsome, cruel, and inhumane reality of what had happened to them. Nearly everyone in the room was crying in these last shared moments in Washington.
Thank you, Mimi. This is Charlotte Brody, and I was lucky enough to be in that room with Chip, and I think David Austin is on the phone, and other staff members of the Brown Lung Association. And by the time we had organized the buses of brown lung victims from the 6 chapters of the Carolina Brown Lung Association to travel to Washington, D.C. to testify for the Cotton Dust Standard, we'd already been in the offices of a lot of government officials. Groups of disabled cotton textile workers had been in the hearing rooms of the worker compensation agencies and the Osha directors and the insurance commissioners in both North and South Carolina. We were all experienced at dealing with bureaucrats. So we thought we kind of knew what to expect from Eula Bingham, the lettered and esteemed grown-up who was the new director of the Federal Occupational Safety and Health Administration. I remember helping everyone get off the bus. The members were so sick, and get into the building and up the elevators and into the room with Eula. And when we got everyone settled with their scripts, there was Eula in the front of the room, strong, in charge, but also, as Mimi read, completely non-defensive and welcoming and gracious. And shocking to us, shocking to me, she was on the same side as us, on the same side as workers. So for the first time, we didn't need to do an action on a government official. We needed to plan action with her. Eula knocked my arrogant little socks off. She showed me that there were more chapters to the history we were becoming part of that we needed to discover and understand and respect. I'm grateful for what she taught me and for her life, and that I got to see her in action on that day and on many days after. Eula Bingham presente.
Thank you, Charlotte. It's beautiful. You had a couple of pictures of Charlotte that Earl took. And next, I was going to turn it over to Earl Dotter, our esteemed photojournalist and friend. And Earl, I wonder if you could kind of pick up the story in terms of the cotton dust legacy.
We'll do that. Thank you, Chip. Thank you, Mimi, and all the folks who at Osha who made it possible for me to do what I do. I came into the black lung and brown lung struggles later. I had done work for a variety of standards that were being promulgated by Osha, the Benzene Standard, and other issues about right to know. And I was impressed initially by how smart the charge I had gotten from Eula was to illustrate the travail and situation that brown lung victims were experiencing. I was given the name of the CEO of the Regal Textile Company. And the reason I was given that name and that company was that they had equipment that already exceeded the cotton dust standard. That was important to show. I called the man and made a proposal. I said, it's really important to show the impact on the workers of what you're already doing with your newer mills and the equipment that is protecting workers from cotton dust. But maybe we could show how far the Regal Textile Company has come by showing some of your older mills and where you're coming from and then where you're going. And he liked that idea. That led me to the mill in Ware Shoals, South Carolina, where I was able to photograph the workers from the cotton bale opening room, the area of most dangerous exposure, largely populated by African Americans. From there, I went to a mill in northern Georgia that had the new equipment. It was a day in each mill, which was wonderful access that was given to me. The mill in Georgia, in northern Georgia, was attached to a prison. I hadn't realized this when I was directed to that mill location, but interestingly enough, the mill staff were all prisoners and were prison labor in that cotton mill, and they had received the benefit of safer equipment. That was the example that I was able to show of the way forward for what the cotton dust standard would enable. The image you're seeing on the screen was taken in the Mississippi Delta, an ironic notion about the safety and the durability, I guess, of the cotton fiber. I was able to photograph much more extensively because of Mimi Conway reaching out to me to take photographs for her book. She had a personal relationship with the likes of Lewis Harrell, who's pictured on the cover of the cotton dust brochure the year he retired, and I believe at age 62, if I'm not correct. Lewis was retired at that time and deathly sick from brown lung disease. He was bedridden, and I was able to show him with a plaque he received for the J.P. Stevens Company after 26 years of loyal and faithful service. That's the image down in the lower right. But if we come back to that previous slide, Chip, the cotton dust standard literature, which was issued in the last year of Eula's administration, was quickly, well, this was meant to reach out to mill workers throughout the country, and the process of distributing this brochure, the brochure on the far right, had begun as Eula stepped away from her role at Osha, and Thorne Auchter, the new appointee of Osha by Ronald Reagan, took office. And one of his first moves was to shred the 50,000 brochures that had been issued and the films that had been issued on this same subject to acquaint cotton mill workers with their rights under the new law. And so you see the blank document. That was the reissued cotton dust standard literature after the illustrated images, the illustrated brochure was issued. And there was quite a bit of publicity about this event. I think this clipping on the left was in the Washington Post. So that said, I was really privileged to photograph the folks primarily in Roanoke Rapids, North Carolina, in their efforts with the Carolina Brown Lung Association, as well as their efforts to organize the J.P. Stevens Mills. And Lewis is featured prominently on a Act II button that was part of that drive to unionize the workers in the 7 mills in Roanoke Rapids and elsewhere throughout the South. And so the Benzene Standard, I photographed in Westville, New Jersey, excuse me. The image on the left of a worker safely taking a benzene sample in a Texaco refinery there. Regarding Right to Know, this was an example of the impact of that initiative taken in Cincinnati at a chemical plant there that John Morowitz accompanied me to that site. So it was an important opportunity, and I praise those folks who, in the administration of Eula Bingham, who realized there was a role for photography to move these initiatives forward. I thank you very much. A couple more pictures. Last year, I had the privilege of meeting up with Eula Bingham at the Asbestos Disease Awareness Organization meeting in Northern Virginia. Eula received the Irving Selikoff Memorial Prize. If you go to the next slide, she's receiving the prize from Dick Lemon and speaking at the conference there. And I was delighted to be able to show Eula my exhibit at the ADAO that included pictures from the era in which I worked with her at Osha. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Will. Beautiful. Yeah, I see Irving Selikoff over her right shoulder there. Yeah, if Eric Fruman is available, you want to pick up the story? Or Glenn Shore?
I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Sure, yeah, Eric, why don't you jump in? Yeah.
Okay, sure. Thanks, Chip. My screen is on. I hope you can see me. Yes, this is a somber moment, but a wonderful opportunity to reconnect with all of you who have had a connection to Eula over the years. I see some comrades in arms are on the call today, George Cohen, Steve Watka, and of course the intrepid organizers, Chip, Charlotte, and others from MIMI from the Carolina Brown Lung Association. For those of you who don't know me, I'm not actually with Unite Here. That's a union I was with in the past. I'm now with the Labor Coalition Change to Win, still doing what Solstead and the Textile Workers Union hired me to do in 1974, which was to use health and safety as an organizing tool. And certainly one of the finest expressions of that was the efforts of the textile workers to bring lung disease among textile workers to the forefront of public concern. My predecessor there, George Perkel, was active in that effort in the late 60s with George Taylor and Tony Mazzocchi, Steve and others Jack Sheehan from the Steelworkers who fought to get the Osha Act passed, and with brown lung being, bisonosis being a prominent concern at the time. And I was joined a little later and was able to work on that in the mid-70s, and our efforts with folks in North Carolina, the North Carolina Public Interest Research Group, to sue Osha under Mort Korn to issue a standard after the Watergate hearings revealed that the first head of Osha, George Ginther, who was appointed by Nixon, he was a hosiery manufacturer from Pennsylvania, that he had proposed to the Nixon re-election campaign in 1972 that they promised the textile industry in exchange for campaign contributions to hold off on any new cotton dust standards. And of course, Roger Milliken, the proto-fascist who ran the biggest privately owned textile company during Milliken, he was the head of he was finance director for the Nixon election campaign. So shades of where we are today. In any case, the proposal that came out of Osha in the end of 1976 by Mort Korn created the foundation for Eula's phenomenal advocacy for these workers. You know, at the time, there were many groups of industrial workers who were sorely in need of OSHA's protections from health hazards, chemical workers and metal workers and others exposed to lead, coke oven workers, chemical workers exposed to benzene and others. Textile workers were, you know, practically a forgotten group. They were the least organized, largest industrial group in the country, and 1 million workers in that industry, and had almost no power. And to me, what was amazing was the ability of the movement to force the issue, even under President Ford, to get a cotton dust standard out of the Labor Department, out of OSHA in the waning days of the Ford administration. And then for Eula to be able to hack her way through the opposition from the neoliberals in the Carter White House to who sought to tear the heart out of Section 6B5 of the OSHA Act and leave us with a standard that required only protective equipment instead of a strict exposure limit. And we saw that fight happen. I remember very clearly the day we heard about the memo that she and Ray Marshall had sent to Carter when someone, presumably Marshall or Bingham, leaked it to David Burnham at the New York Times. And we were, the secrets were out about Schultz and the other economists at the White House trying to bury the standard, push back against these textile workers. And of course, this was happening at the very same time that the workers in Roanoke Rapids were leading the charge for organizing workers in the South. At the very same moment that Eula and Ray were fighting it out at the White House, the AFL-CIO's effort to get labor law reform was floundering in the Senate in the month of May 1978. So while the standard was hanging by a thread, the filibuster against labor law reform was on the floor at the Senate, and courtesy of Dale Bumpers, that snake, Bill Clinton's mentor, former governor and senator from Arkansas, was the deciding vote to support the filibuster and block passage of the labor law reform to make it easier for workers to organize. Somehow this standard, this vital protection for so many abused, impoverished workers in the Southern textile industry managed to survive. It blows my mind yet today that happened. And without
Thanks, Eric.
a partisan like Eula to do that, it never would have happened, no question. So hats off to Eula and to the people around her, to Ray Marshall and everybody on this call who had a hand in it, certainly to George Cohen for his advocacy before the Supreme Court later on. And it was a glorious fight, and I was so pleased and honored and privileged to be part of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric. Beautiful. Could I turn it over to Glenn Shore? Are you available?
Hi.
Hey, Glenn. Yeah, I actually lifted this actual memo that I thought you might want to talk about. That was from your article that was in New Solutions.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I think this was the memo that actually implemented the destruction of the cotton dust brochure with the pictures in it. And it was at the end of the administration when
WorkSafe and maybe a few others in the mix.
I don't know what's going on there.
Did you guys mute Eric? Oh, thank you. Okay, got it.
So the article that we did was, I think, was the first time that memo was published, showing that there was a direction from OSHA to take away that the brochure that had the pictures in it. But let me say a few other things about that time. 1978 was when I arrived at the Labor Department and worked about 50 feet across the hall from Eula for the Assistant Secretary for Policy Evaluation and Research at the Department of Labor. And our study was in the wake of the Black Lung Amendments. We were supposed to do a study to see if there were any other occupational diseases that maybe needed federal intervention. And the three that we looked at for our study, our interim report on occupational disease compensation, were cotton dust, asbestos-related disease, and radiation-related illnesses. And for me, that was really the beginnings of my workers' comp and occupational health career. It's the time that I met Chip and Mimi and went to some of the brown lung confabs. And we did a study in Columbia, South Carolina, of cotton dust workers that Chip and Frank's last name ran, but it was Blackman. and showed how few workers in those other occupational diseases were able to get compensation for their occupational disease, and how much of a failure workers' compensation had been for occupational disease. So I think Eula's memory, and during that time, just trying to expose what was going on. But Eula's legacy lives, I think, because she brought countless committed workers, academics, health professionals, and other individuals, labor folks, into the occupational health movement. And it was just a time when, I think, just an exciting time for all of us, and hopefully we'll get those times back.
Is George Cohen with us? He was the next person in this cotton dust segment. George, are you available to unmute? Carrie, do you know if George is still here, or Deborah?
He is. There he's unmuted.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, George, why don't you jump in? Hey, how you doing?
Well, first of all, I've loved these reminiscences. You know, we're talking about 40, 50 years ago. Let me make a general observation. First of all, I'm approaching this from, you ready for this, Chip? The legal aspect of it. And I want to say something first about Eula Bingham. I had the high honor of being a union lawyer from 1966 to 2005, and then the director of federal mediation conciliation under President Obama. So I dealt with a lot of corporate officials and a lot of government bureaucrats. I think I can say, without question, Eula Bingham was the most powerful public sector person I ever had the pleasure and the honor of working with. She made up her mind. She had an incredibly persuasive about her. She did not kowtow to politics or the corporate world. And I think a wonderful point of reference here is, what did American industry do with respect to each one of the standards that she established? They formed a multi-million-dollar, quote, war chest. And that's a magical word. It was, in fact, a war chest, and we were engaged in war. Because in all due respects to everybody who was working on this administratively, who I've admired and respected, the bottom line, Chip, is until a standard goes to the Court of Appeals and they issue an order enforcing it, it has no force whatsoever. So I had the ultimate honor of representing the unions and Osha together before the DC Circuit, first in lead, cotton dust, and unfortunately, if I ticked off the name of every toxic substance, we'd all start feeling bad. But it certainly started with coke ovens and asbestos, and there we were in the Court of Appeals on both cotton dust and benzene, and ultimately the Supreme Court in 1981 in cotton dust. And here's a fascinating memorabilia for you. We argued cotton dust on January 21st, 1981, the day after Ronald Reagan became president of the United States, and Robert Bork, the lawyer for ATMI, American Textile Manufacturing Institute, one of the premier powerful lawyers of all times, stood up before the Supreme Court and tried basically to persuade them that since we now have a new administration, they shouldn't pay much attention to all the effort, time, and energy that went into the cotton dust stand. So I thought you ought to know that Eula had an amazing understanding of what the challenge was. She was not kidding herself. She knew until we got 3 judges in black robes and eventually 9 before the Supreme Court, that all this effort, all this energy. So I had the pleasure of sharing with her those discussions, how we were going to move forward. And what I loved about the people who have spoken here, Eula Bingham understood that bureaucracy was not the answer. Human beings, the photographs that went on, the behind the scenes. She also was aware You want to set the highest standard, so you look for someone who's already done it. And that was the secret to her success. I want to quickly say, American industry had three major arguments. One, that from a health standpoint, the safety, the structure, the standard was too restrictive. Number two, even if it wasn't too restrictive, we didn't have the technology to be able to achieve that. And then number three, a fascinating argument. Even if we had the technology, we couldn't afford the technology. So it was beyond the cost. And Eula Bingham was my right-hand person in saying, OSHA was the cost-benefit analysis. And we had to get the Supreme Court to say that the fact that a, quote, cost-benefit analysis did not take place was irrelevant under this statute. Section 6B5, in my judgment, remains the single most progressive section of any labor law that has ever been passed, and Supreme Court Rule 6-3, giving us the exact interpretation we wanted. And ladies and gentlemen, were we now arguing today the likelihood of that ever happening, that Justice Brennan's majority opinion? Zero, right? Zero. So we have to honor her and thank her for her amazing leadership. And as I said, on a personal note, it was one of the best experiences of my professional life. Thank you.
Thank you, George. It's beautiful. Yeah, I mean, putting a value on human life, that's what we were talking about in that case. ATMI versus Dunderman, I guess, right? If it's possible, can I next turn it over to Donald Ellisberg, who is Assistant Secretary of Labor at the time? Don, are you available?
I'm here.
Hey, you want to jump in a little bit?
A little bit, because I'm not even sure where to begin with all of these well-known and powerful people who participated with mostly stuff that I've been involved in as well for the last 50 years or so. I took a little, did a little math yesterday and decided that I actually was associated in one way or another, knew Eula Bingham for 46 years. Because it began sometime in 1975, before the 76 election. And the important thing I wanted to note is that I spent 4 years walking down the private corridors between the assistant secretaries. She was next door to me. And what I observed, which is the point I wanted to make, is that almost every time I came by her office, she was holding some kind of a seminar or symposium for her staff or people in the Osha system. And I actually got to know a lot of people, including some that are on the call today, just by walking by and chatting with them and learning a lot about everything that you could learn in my walk down the office to the solicitor or the secretary. So it was very pleasurable for me to become that part of an OSHA knowledge by osmosis. I think most of the rest of you know that I was one of the counsel that actually drafted the statute and drafted the Georgia 6B. And we knew actually that that was a piece of the statute that was going to go to the Supreme Court eventually. We also had the struggle, and while I was on the Hill with George Gunther and the others. The only one who had some hope was Mort Cohen, who at least perceived that there were things you were supposed to do with that statute. But I found that everybody that's talking about cotton dust and asbestos and nuclear workers and so many other things that we went through, were all part of, in a way, Eula's legacy of taking hold of this system and figuring out what to do and getting the standards done. My personal pride is that I had various dialogues, because I was running the farm worker program, about how we had to get field toilets for farm workers. And when I go out to the Redlands out here in Miami, there's always one of these field toilets in the fields out there. I say, well, I did that. I did that with Eula. So that's my contribution here, is that she was always, always, always teaching anybody she could talk to.
Great. Thank you, Don. Is our friends from California available? That would be John Freunds and Andrea Harico. You want to come up next?
I'm sorry, John had to take a short break. Could we be next?
Yeah, or do you want to have somebody? Actually, I had one other person who we missed, which is Suzanne May. Yeah.
I could do my comments at this point.
Okay. Yeah. I didn't want to miss John.
They're very short. So I would just like to add a few comments in honor of Eula. In the late 70s, the issue of reproductive health effects in women became politically charged when some companies started sterilizing women at plants, especially plants with toxic chemicals, especially where lead was involved, and started requiring women to be sterilized. Eula was supportive of having workplaces safe enough even for pregnant women, and she also stated forcefully that male reproductive hazards had to be considered in the workplace standards as well. And we really applaud her for that. Secondly, I would like to personally thank Eula for her appointments to the National Advisory Committee on Occupational Safety and Health, or NACOSH. Claudia Miller and I were appointed to NACOSH by Eula. Claudia recently told me, and I don't think I really knew that we were the first 2 women ever appointed to NACOSH. She and I thank Eula for her recognition of the need for women in leadership positions and for everything she did to protect workers in this country. Also, as so many people in this room and out of this Zoom call credit Eula with the direction of their careers. And Rob McConnell, who's a close friend and a USC professor, told me the other day how important Eula's Summer Institute for Health Professionals was for his career. And I should add that David Michaels was was his mentor. Finally, there's a lot I personally owe Eula for appointing me to NACOSH. I lived in San Francisco in 1979, and one of those cross-country trips to Washington, D.C. for a committee meeting allowed me to have my first date with John Freunds, who I'm sorry is not at my side right now. So thank you, Eula, for this and everything you've done for workers. Thank you. And John will be back in a second.
Okay. Yeah, I had one other person, Suzanne Major. I don't know if she's available, if she could be unmuted. We missed her earlier about the New Directions program. Suzanne, are you available?
Can you hear me?
Loud and clear, thank you.
Great, fabulous.
Hey.
I will try to even give myself some video here.
Okay, love to see you.
Hi there.
Hey.
I am really honored to be asked to speak as a former New Directions staffer. First, I wanted to add to what Andrea said about the lead exposure to women and men. And what I think many people don't realize, and I am totally convinced of, is that the data in the preamble to the lead standard was instrumental in the Supreme Court's decision in UAW versus Johnson Controls and in getting rid of the standard that Andrea mentioned of sterilizing women who were in jobs rather than making the workplace safe for everyone. So thank you for mentioning that, Andrea. And I don't feel like I'm the one to speak because I really didn't have a whole lot of personal contact with Dr. Bingham. When I did, it was inspirational. But I wanted to say that she created a very supportive workplace for women. She hired really and appointed really fabulous women leaders and gave them the support and the courage to do great things. I worked for Marilyn Powers, who was a fabulous leader, and the New Directions program has created an incredible legacy of health and safety professionals, I think, contributed to the continuance and survival of an expansion of COSH groups throughout the country and the world. And I think all of this is a tribute to Dr. Bingham. I also think that she was incredibly supportive to women industrial hygienists and particularly women of color, encouraging them and to pursue the career and the profession. And I think that our entire health and safety movement would be entirely different were it not for Dr. Bingham.
Thank you, Suzanne. Andre, do you want to come back to John, or should we move on to Peter Dooley?
Speaking of cautious.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Nice
Peter!
to follow you again. So let me just say a little bit about personally. I became aware of Eula Bingham in 1977 when I was working on a forestry crew with chainsaws, and that was after working in an oil refinery and this kind of stuff. And I was getting interested in trying to protect myself. And everywhere I looked, there were all these programs that were started by the new administration to provide educational opportunities for workers and everyone in health and safety. So it was really sort of a very a wonderful experience to be finding all of these opportunities. And I know that really was the case, as many people on the call have mentioned, with a lot of other folks within the COSH movement, as well as unions and all workers. And I got a chance to personally meet Eula in the last 15 years as part of being on advisory boards with her, with particularly unions, the steel workers and the chemical workers union. And of course, she was just so incredibly always advocating for the importance of educating workers about their rights, about sort of the technical issues around health and safety. And that was her mantra, is how important it is to be getting training and education and information to all workers at sort of on the ground floor. And she always enjoyed, of course, that I had a long career with the United Auto Workers, which she had a special sense of the solidarity with the UAW, and she told me the story of her becoming the head of OSHA. She explained that in the early 70s, she had gone on a international delegation with the UAW to Sweden to look at their worker centers, worker circles education programs, which the UAW had modeled its worker education programs around, and particularly the health and safety, aspects of it. And she had met a lot of the delegation of UAW sort of emerging leaders at that time. And then when the new administration happened in 76, several UAW folks, particularly ones that had been leaders in the Kohler strike, in which was a really important victory for the UAW. And there's an incredible book about that struggle if you ever want to learn more about it. But so those folks came to Eula and asked her if she would be interested in being considered for the head of OSHA position. Of which she sort of gratefully accepted the idea, the concept, and the UAW worked within the labor movement to put that forward, and she credited that connection that she had made with those unionists on that delegation, with how she got to be the head of OSHA. So anyway,
Great,
just a
Peter.
personal story that she really loved to share. Thanks.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
That's great. Hey, is Celeste available? I don't know if she's on. If not, we'll go to Peg. Peg, are you available? Peg Seminario, former head of safety and health for AFL-CIO.
Yep, Peg is here.
Hey, Peg, jump
Hi.
in. Hey.
Wait a minute. Good to see all of you. My God, this is really pretty amazing here. So I first met Eula right at the beginning of my work with the AFL-CIO, which was in July of 1977, where I came for 1 year to be an intern in safety and health. And my boss was George Taylor. And Eula had become assistant secretary a few months before. And one of the things that Eula was doing was she was doing a lot of standards. And I was an industrial hygienist and doing health standards. And I must have spent pretty much the next 4 years of living in the auditorium at the Labor Department, working on all the various standards. But, in thinking about Eula, what really strikes me, my cat Maddie might get in the way here, but anyway, what really strikes me sort of, thinking about it and looking at what's happened over time here is, how incredibly effective she was. I mean, I don't think we realized it at the time. I mean, those of us in the labor movement, and Steve Watka is, I think participating in this, and a lot of folks were always on Eula like she was never doing enough. But when we look at what she did in the course of those less than 4 years. So I was putting together a list of all of those things that she did. And, we've heard about the cotton dust and benzene, but we had DBCP, as Andrea talked about. We had arsenic. We had lead, the cancer policy. Who could forget the cancer policy, the EPIS, and how we were going to deal with carcinogens, hearing conservation, right? That came out right at the end of the administration. But I think as importantly, I mean, those were really landmark protections. And when you think of, and they were all big deals, all of them were really big deals, and that, got them done in that period of time. But some of the most important things that she did in the way of both programmatic policy and regulations were those things that were really focused on building worker knowledge and worker rights and worker power. And obviously there was new directions, but the access to medical records and exposure rule, which gave workers the right for the first time access to information about exposures in the workplace and their own medical records. She did the foundation on Right to Know in the hazard identification standard, which came out in a proposal on January 18th or January 16th, 1981. But she also, Andrea talked about reproductive rights. I mean, OSHA cited employers under the Occupational Safety and Health Act for their policies of excluding women. Can you imagine that happened today? I mean, the lead standard, medical removal protection, saying you have to pay workers if they're coming off the job. She put in place the regulations that gave workers the legal right, or implemented the right to refuse hazardous work. I mean, so you look at all of this in less than 4 years that she got done. I mean, absolutely, absolutely amazing. And so I think, for me, anyway, when I look back, That's how I came into safety and health. And that's what I thought we should be doing and what was possible. And so she not only did all of this, I mean, she really defined what we needed to do and how we should do it. And that it really needed to be based on, as Peter said, educating workers, on engaging workers, and giving them the right and the power to exercise their rights in the workplace. And so we really could not have had anyone, be a better friend, a better mentor, a better leader. And when we really think about it, no one that I can think of has done more to advance and improve the protections for working people in this country than Dr. Eula Bingham. And so God bless her. And aren't we blessed to have been part of her world and part of her life? Thank you.
Definitely, definitely. Thank you, Peg. Is Denny Dobbin available?
I am.
Hey, Denny,
Hey,
jump in.
Sure. Well, it's wonderful to be able to celebrate Eula's life and her accomplishments in her career. She's a woman for all seasons, I think. And we should think too back to before OSHA, when she was an accomplished scientist, and her seminal work on optical brighteners to show that they're when she was testing those for cancer, and how she worked her way through the science education to become a professor at the University of Cincinnati, and then went on, of course, to work on the coke oven emissions panel, and then become involved with more and more health and safety. She was a compassionate leader. We've heard a lot about that today. And she was an inspiring mentor. As one previous speaker had said, had mentioned a number of the people that she brought in, the industrial hygienists, the health scientists that she brought in from outside of OSHA, which had a very small industrial hygiene group. And she was able to bring folks in there, and then go on to build careers among professionals in the field, and then also her work in New Directions. And with New Directions, she actually her joy there spread widely. Certainly, the program that Chip runs was
And you started. And John Dement. John Dement.
To be fair. But John, I remember going around with John to talk to various folks, and we really learned and looked to what the New Directions program had done, and really did make a lot of difference in terms of how it crafted the program and how it existed today. And I think the proof of that, between what's now the Susan Harwell grant program at OSHA and the NIHS program, millions and millions of workers have really benefited from that, and not just in terms of health and safety protection, but also in terms of leadership. I think in developing leadership to push back in the workplace when they go back from the training. She was very inspiring to us. We also should mention some of her work with the Collegium Benzene. She was a leader there, as Phil mentioned earlier. And I remember specifically when Cesar Maltoni died, and we in the U.S. felt we had to have a presence in his burial in Ferrari, Italy, where his family was from. And not many people were available, but Eula was available. I mean, she really did care about her people, as it were. And so I was available too in short notice, and so I accompanied her to Ferrari to attend Cesar's final moments. And while we were there, but to show her leadership, immediately after the ceremonies, we met with our General Secretary, Safridi, at in a restaurant with some funders there, and she went on to help Safridi lobby one of the funders for the collegiums, I should say the Benzene Institute, for funding for the excellent work that they do. So she was always like pushing those things. Oh, and it struck me, an inspiration for me personally was how she kept on going to work. Her work kept her going right until the very end, and that should inspire us all, and for all of us to take on as we in her honor, to try to inspire younger folks as they're coming up to the health and safety movement.
Thank you, Danny. Well, even when we retire, right, we're supposed to keep going. Hey, next up I had David Michaels, and then also Jim Merchant on deck, and maybe back to John Freund. So I know our time is really short. So David, I think you were next on the list.
Thanks, and I'll be brief. First, Chip and Terry, thank you for putting this together. It's really pretty amazing to see all of so many old friends, especially in this time. You know, we're in a massive crisis in the country, but also in worker health and safety. And when we think back on the innovative and creative and strong things that Eula did, and many of us were inspired by, and I think we have to really take advantage of that and help each other to push forward through this, because there has been no period like this. And we have to remember that it's such a difficult time. And you know, when I was at Osha with sort of Eula's descendants, and Jordan Barab and Debbie Burkett, we would often say it was almost like we needed a little bracelet. What would Eula do? There were many still vestiges of her programs, like Susan Harwood, but there were plenty of others, new things around it, new challenges. But Eula was a presence, and you know, we'd see her when she'd come through Washington and also at different meetings, and she was always very supportive and saying, pushing us harder. You know, we all felt like we were tiny compared to what she accomplished, and we'd always look at that and say, what could we do? And one particular story that I think many of you know, but it's worth repeating here, was around defending the hierarchy of controls, which is, you know, in some ways it's OSHA religion. But every OSHA leader, starting with Eula and subsequently, has had to defend the hierarchy of controls with the White House. Because it's very easy to think, well, you know, there's an exposure out there. Why don't you just give workers a respirator, and then you don't have to worry about anything else, and let work go on as it did. And we certainly dealt with that with silica when we heard that President Obama had been briefed on our silica proposal, and he evidently, this is all secondhand, he told, you know, the people briefing him from OMB, you know, why don't they just give workers respirators? Why do we insist that they actually use engineering controls? Of course, the story that we went back to was that when the Council of Economic Advisors said that same thing to Eula around the cotton dust standard, she and Ray Marshall went to the president, who was Jimmy Carter, and said, you know, if you make us do that, we'll resign. And of course, you know, we said if we needed to do that, we would. I went to the meeting with the head of OMB and the various domestic policy counselors and things like that, and essentially presented the hierarchy of controls, and we brought respirators and said, here, try one of these on. And you know, it's not hard to explain to someone why a respirator doesn't, you know, solve the problem. But you know, sometimes you've got to go to great lengths to defend that principle. And of course, we looked at Eula and said, you know, she was our inspiration. She said, we're not going to let this pass. And we certainly didn't let this pass either. So we have to keep remembering that work. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, David. Great. Actually, John Freund, do you want to jump in? Missed your first time around. Andrea, hey.
On behalf of John, as some of you know, John has Parkinson's disease, and unfortunately last night he had a bad fall, and he's still a little rattled from that. So he asked if I would read what he wrote. John says I first met Eula when I saw her at an industrial hygiene meeting in New Orleans in 1977. She was just getting started at OSHA and she needed scientists, and she expressed an interest in my working with her, and eventually I became director of the Office of Toxic Substances. She was committed, as we all know, to setting new workplace health standards and assigned me 2 standards, cotton dust, which we've heard so much about, and lead. With cotton dust, of course, she wanted to set a PEL as opposed to the use of respirators, which industry was arguing for vociferously, while there was pressure from unions and others to establish a permissible exposure limit. Eula took the extraordinary step in the photos that I think Chip showed of, of meeting with President Carter, and he supported Eula. So our team set about developing a standard based on the use of engineering controls. We relied on great science by Jim Merchant and others, and advocacy for workers' health by the Textile Workers Union and Carolina Brown Lung Association. Next, we took on the lead standard, and we haven't heard much about lead today, but our team had experts in law, economics, and science, and my job was to write the health effects section. Eula and I discussed the setting of a PEL, and we agreed to a 50 microgram PEL in contrast to the existing 200. We set a blood lead level limit and required blood lead measurements, which was really unusual at the time. We also developed the unique medical removal protection to take workers with elevated blood leads out of the workplace until their blood lead levels were deemed to be safe. It was a landmark standard that was supported by many unions, but especially the UAW and the steel workers. Importantly, though, today it needs a rewrite, and it needs to be updated to reflect current knowledge about lead and updated scientific research, with thanks to what we would learn from Phil Landrigan, Bruce Lamphere, and others. Eula and I became close personal friends, and we shared a commitment to occupational health. She was a remarkable person, indeed a hero in her field and in government service. She had a great sense of humor, and she was always fun to be with. She will always be loved and cherished. Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Andrea. It's beautiful. If Jim, Jim Merchant, would you like to chime in since you were just mentioned? I missed you first time around. You can unmute. You should unmute. Oh, I had him. Jim? Lost him. Jim, can you go?
Yeah.
Hey, Greg, jump in. Sure, jump in. Yeah.
Okay.
Go for it.
Well, sorry I'm late. Thanks,
right.
Chip. And wonderful to see so many names and hear so many stories. And probably a good deal has been said about cotton dust. In the late 70s, I was working for NIOSH as the director of the Appalachian Laboratory for Occupational Safety and Health. And we together put together the criteria, the cotton dust criteria document, and sent it over to OSHA. And when Eula and OSHA decided to take that up as a standard after a great deal of pushback from industry, I was sent as a special assistant by Jack Finkley to be Eula's special assistant for the cotton dust hearings. And that meant mainly working with the solicitor's office. And we were able to catch the industry in fabricating data, which is of course hard to believe, but they actually did. But unfortunately, they had published some of it, and we were able to show that their data was indeed fabricated. And then this, and as has been said, the standard was drafted, but it was not a sure thing. And I recall Eula telling me the story, and she was a wonderful storyteller. Years later, she told me the story of the meeting in the Oval Office with Jimmy Carter and with Ray Marshall, and then the Council of Economic Advisors, and Walter Mondale on the other side, very concerned about cost benefit of this standard. And of course, this was the primary argument of the the industry at the time of the cotton dust hearings. And after her forceful advocation for the cotton dust standard, she told me, Carter came over, put his arm around her shoulder with his characteristic smile and said, with this one, I'm with Eula. And with that, the cotton dust standard was promulgated. And of course, then it went on to be appealed fortunately, the textile workers appeal in the First District Court was was upheld. And then, of course, the Supreme Court upheld it almost in its entirety, really forming a very important precedent on terms of cost-benefit analysis and the fact that this was not something that should be considered. In fact, had been taken into consideration in promulgation of the Occupational Safety and Health Act. Robert Bork, the famous the solicitor of the Saturday Night Massacre, was the lawyer who argued the case for the industry, and he lost that one too. So those are my memories of Eula, and I'll forever be thankful, and her forceful advocacy for workers will always be part of her epitaph.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim. Just two other people. I had Mike Wright, if you're available, Mike.
I am. Can
Hey,
you hear
Mike.
me?
Sure, yeah. You want to give us a little reflection? We're almost at our time, but I wanted to.
Yeah, understood.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of common when you're at the end of a long string of speakers to say it's all been said, but in Eula's case, we could go on for days and we wouldn't say it all. We wouldn't even begin to list her accomplishments. So I'm going to talk about two stories that really haven't been told so far in this group. The first is about the OSHA coke oven standard. Eula was the head of the coke oven advisory committee that worked with our union and with the steel companies to try to craft a standard or to try to craft a recommendation. They didn't get there, but Eula's work was really instrumental in what finally became the coke oven standard, which was actually promulgated under Mort Cohen, her immediate predecessor. Two of the things she did was really worked to show that a standard could include both a PEL and a strong suite of work practice controls and engineering controls, and that's what that standard did. Even more important, the way she treated the coke oven workers who came to those hearings, came to those meetings, a situation they were not familiar with. The way she gave them confidence, the way she treated them with enormous respect really made it possible for them to testify effectively in the actual hearings that finally led to the standard. So we in the steelworkers owe her a great debt of gratitude for that. The second thing I want to talk about is the Beryllium Standard, which was not a victory and not an accomplishment in the traditional sense, but really demonstrates what Eula's character was. In 1977, OSHA attempted to set a new Beryllium Standard. First thing I did when I came to the steelworkers, and I think one of the first things Peg Seminario did at the AFL-CIO was represent workers in those beryllium hearings. If you've done this for a while, you can kind of score a hearing like you do a boxing match. And we won that match with at least a technical knockout. But the fix was in. And the beryllium companies, the main one, Brush-Wellman, which acted as nasty as any company we have ever seen in any subsequent hearing, went to the Department of Defense and to the predecessor of the Energy Department under James Schlesinger and convinced them that if we had to better regulate this critical material used in making nuclear weapons, within 10 years we'd all be speaking Russian. And Jimmy Carter just could not overcome that pressure and basically canceled the hearings. Eula must have thought about resigning at that point. She was really devastated by what had happened, but she stuck around. She made absolutely the right decision. And the result of that decision was cotton dust, lead, arsenic, the first stages of hazard communication, the worst accident in OSHA's history, which she guided it through deftly, the Willow Island construction tragedy, which killed 51 workers. The first ergonomic citation, the beginning of the HAZCOM standard, all those things. But most important, the real ideal of what a regulatory agency could be: smart, tough, compassionate, committed. Whether it's OSHA or MSHA or EPA or the CSB or the CPSB, any of those things. It's an ideal that is rarely lived up to. It has really never been exceeded. One last point. After we achieved the new Beryllium Standard, when OSHA released it, and of course we're still in the end game. But when OSHA released it, one of the people I called first was Eula, and said, that we finally had an OSHA Beryllium Standard. And typical Eula, her response was, "Well, it's about time." That's the kind of person she was. Eula, we're going to miss you enormously, but we still have with us all of the things you accomplished, and they will be with us forever.
Beautifully said, Mike. Thank you. Hey, that was the planned program, and we're at an hour and a half. I did really want to give Martha and other family members a chance to maybe say something, and then other folks who would want to chime in. And I guess we can we can go a little longer if people want to hang in there. But Carol, back to you. Does that sound like an okay way to proceed? Yeah. So who would like to speak from Eula's family? And Martha, you're muted. You're muted. Hey.
This is Martha. Can you hear me?
Very well. Thank you, Martha.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I am Martha Mattice, Eula Bingham Mattice's middle daughter. I live in Minnesota now, where I am a child protection and criminal prosecutor. But Mom and I have been just fast friends and mother-daughter for, I only remember one little rough thing as a teenager, and everybody goes through that, but we've stayed in touch every day, and I've traveled miles and miles to see her and with her through thick and thin. I wanted to thank Chip, Phil, and Carol, and all of the attendees and organizers for this event and gathering everyone together for Mom. This is about the time of year that if she had not done it already, she would be packing to go to the Remembrance conference in Italy. My sister Julia would help her get documents and her itinerary ready. I think last year this time she was at a meeting in Washington, and Denny Dobbin was relaying information for our family. Last year I was prepped to go with her until the last couple days. She felt ill and thought she shouldn't end up in a hospital in Italy if things didn't go well. I don't think she didn't know I didn't know if she knew even that anything was lurking up ahead. I think many of you I've talked to over the phone, and perhaps when I was at the conference in Italy a couple of times. One time we traveled to Cinque Terre along the coast after the conference. I want to thank each and every one of you in your own ways. You were part of her worker health and safety family, her scientific family, her friends, and her colleagues. Whether you were meeting in Italy or other countries, Atlanta, California, Washington, D.C., New York, Boston, coast to coast. And every phone call, every email, every reach out brought a new invigoration and smile to my mom's face. Growing up with my mom, some memories were always her forward-thinking plans. What were we doing next? What should happen next? All of the topics, photos, articles have me running back in my mind as a child for all the causes and efforts, the company names you've thrown out that have caused such destruction: lead, cotton dust, brown lung, benzene, the coke ovens, and all the chemicals. Going to her office at the Department of Labor and seeing that enormous table where she had people gathered, and at Kettering Laboratory at the University of Cincinnati. Seeing safety equipment described and scientific studies at home on the breakfast table. As a young child, I remember learning chemical names from her. Just over the years, when there was an incident, regulation, something that there was going to be a grant to study about, or a substance that was causing workers to be sick. There were very sad times when there was a fire, an explosion, a trench that had collapsed, an accident in a coal mine or a grain elevator that had exploded. Chemicals, disease names, and conditions of the workplace were always at her forefront. And the safety regulations needed equipment, and union efforts were tireless causes for her. I remember going by buildings in other countries and watching scaffolding, and was that safe or not? And her eye was always sharp, what was happening and what was happening that could affect the safety of workers. I remember her extreme generosity and encouragement for all of us to make it through difficult times. Having been born in the year of the Depression, she learned from her grandmother, or my grandmother, her mother, what to do when circumstances were challenging, things didn't go her way, and there were obstacles. Her compassion, empathy, tenacity, and advocating for the safety of others stood me through many difficult times. Yet she was able to bring science to my level as the artsy, creative one who then went to law school. I can remember getting science lessons from her at the beach, at the farm, in the garden, and even over a plate of lobster in Cape Cod, where some of you may have probably been around that table. I again want to thank all of you, friends and colleagues of my mom, on behalf of my sisters and all of my family. As we are taking it day by day moving forward, I ask myself, what would Mom do? As you forge ahead this year, in the coming years at work, in your daily lives, I know you will keep Eula in your thoughts, keep wind in your sails, and spring in your step. And you will see her smile as we've seen in the photos you've shared. I hope you all continue to hear the encouragement of my mom, continue to fight for worker health and safety, and ask yourself, as someone said, what would Eula Bingham do? In her last trip to the Kettering Laboratory that I took her to last December, where her new office had just been installed, she gave a thumbs up in front of it that she was back in her home front and back where she began her start. Thank you all. Blessings to you. Stay safe. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Martha. Beautiful. Now I see Helen's on. Helen, do you want to say a little something with even the next generation?
Sure. Just have a few words. It's so absolutely amazing to see all of you. on this call. I grew up with so many of you. I just want to thank you so much for being her friend and colleague. She deeply loved what she did. She loved her professional community, and she loved so many of you. As Martha said, you too were her family. You gave her unconditional support, intellectual challenge, and a shared community to make a difference in the lives of workers around the world. As her youngest daughter, who tagged along at many of her professional meetings and dinners from the time I was very young, I will be forever grateful to you, not only for educating me on occupational safety and health issues, but most importantly for modeling an amazingly caring community committed to making the world a better place. Thank you for supporting her, and thank you all for doing all that you've done and continue to do. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Here's Anna, okay. And here's Charlotte, and here's Brett. I don't know if they want to say anything.
Good. Please jump in if you want to say something. It'd be great. Kids.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Anna.
Hi,
Again, pretty much everyone has said thank you so much for being here. When reading different articles that news centers or other places wrote about her, well, it made me feel sad because I'm going to miss her so much. It also made me feel incredibly proud to be related to her and to have been able to grow up hearing stories about her job and many of you. Thank you.
Speak up. Do you want to say anything?
In the mornings we would sit together, and she told me stories a lot about her time working, and yeah.
So they were morning buddies, and as you can imagine, my mom used that time to educate her. And so Charlotte and her had a lot of mornings spent, especially when they were on vacation. They were the early risers, and they would sit down and have coffee. And I'm sure my mom shared a lot of knowledge and advice with her.
beautiful.
So
Thank you,
thank
Helen.
you again.
Thanks, Helen. Yeah, I guess, yeah, just a couple of things. We're recording this, so we wanted to make sure that you all would get a copy and we could save it on Mark Catlin's YouTube channel or wherever. And also, I just wanted to draw people's attention to the chat box. Has been also really amazing. The comments that the stories that people have shared. We got a lot of great stuff there also. So we'll make sure we capture that and preserve it for history, for sure. That was sort of the basic program that we had, and we still have a few more minutes. So I guess if somebody would like make any comments, we wanted to open it up maybe for the next few minutes. Either you want to raise your hand or unmute if you'd like to say. Oh, Gil, yes.
Owen.
Great. Thank you, Gil.
Well, this whole program has been a blessing for all of us to remember so completely these exciting and important times in the country. Eula was a hero, an icon, and I loved her dearly. I'm very grateful to her and Phil and Irv and Dave Raw for involving me in the Collegium Ramazzini. And she, of course, believed strongly in that international activity as well. Just want to mention a couple of things that haven't been mentioned. She was a very important figure in something called the Interagency Regulatory Liaison Group. And I was the White House person when I was Deputy Science Advisor for President Carter under Frank Press. So it was Don Kennedy, Doug Costel, Eula, Carol Foreman from Agriculture, and Susan King from CPSC. And
I believe there was a breakfast club, right, Gil? A breakfast club?
Right. And it was powerful. It was a time when risk assessment was just coming into practice, first at EPA. And I just had an opportunity, a request to do an article about the origins of risk assessment with Elizabeth Anderson, who was very active from the EPA side. Anyway, it's a whole big story. The second thing I wanted to mention is the National Academies. Eula was a very well-respected scientist and policy person in the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, now called the National Academy of Medicine. All those years it was the Institute of Medicine. And she was influential in many reports and many studies. Finally, I was influenced personally by her and a few others that when I returned from Washington after the OSDP and OMB duties and writing a book at Brookings, I went back to the University of Washington in my role in medicine and agreed to be chairman of the Department of Environmental and Occupational Health, which was a very important piece of my history, and then Dean of Public Health and so forth. So I'm very fond of her, and I'm glad to hear those wonderful comments from her family. And of course, from all of you, most of the names this afternoon are people I remember more or less vividly, some from a distance, from the ACLU and from the AFL-CIO and from the departments of the federal agencies from that Carter administration. Thank you all so very much, and thank you for giving me a chance to speak up.
Thank you, Gil.
Hi, this is Dick Lemon. I just wanted to make
Hey, Dick.
quick comment. As John Freund said, Dr. Bingham had a very great sense of humor, and I wanted to share one short story. After the Reagan administration came in and they were just setting up, there was a bar association meeting in Florida, and a young lawyer in Florida stood up and said at the meeting when talking about Osha that the wicked witch is dead. And Dr. Bingham later received an award from Senator Phil, the Senator Phil Hart Award, and on the urban and working environment. And she said with a resounding echo, well, I'm here to tell you that the wicked witch is not dead. She's merely rearranging her broom and passing out a lot more brooms to her students. And boy, has she passed out a lot of brooms, and I got one of her brooms. Thank you.
Beautiful, Dick. Anybody else want to jump in?
Chip, I'd like to jump in.
Please. Oh, you get a second bite at the apple. You appellate lawyer.
I think you muted yourself.
I know.
George.
Thank you, Jerry Pojay. Sweep them out.
I am muted. Oh, I'm sorry.
George, he just muted himself. George, did you want to say something? You're muted.
Am I okay now?
Now you're okay. Don't unmute.
Okay. The bottom line was workers exposed to lead, high blood level. What are we going to do about it? And the wisdom, the conventional wisdom was you'll notify workers, you'll give them the opportunity to decide, do they want to stay under those circumstances and risk some injury, or do they want to leave that high-paying job and not be in economic security? Eula Bingham stood tall and strong. Eula Bingham looked at people like Mike Wright of the Steelworkers, Peggy Seminario, myself, and we all came to one conclusion. We have to do something that no one had ever tried before under this law, in which to say, at that point, there's mandatory removal, but for the next 18 months, all the workers' seniority and wages will be protected. If you think that didn't drive American industry right off of their seat of their pants, you would not be surprised. So there she was, once again, her dedication, her devotion. And I remember distinctly the day before I was going to make that argument, she looked at me and she said, now, George, mandatory removal has got to come out of your mouth very strongly. And I said, you'll be there, not to worry. And the Court of Appeals, in a brilliantly written opinion, reaffirmed that as being part and parcel of the incredible discretionary authority that she had as Assistant Secretary of OSHA. Without her, I think everybody on this call understands there would have been no medical removal protection the way it actually came to pass.
Thank you, George.
Chip,
yeah, Nick or Jerry?
Yeah.
Or Nick? Yeah, you guys.
this is Nick Ashford. It's really wonderful to see reconnected to so many of my friends, even on this somber occasion. I worked with you shortly after I wrote Crisis in the Workplace. Mort Cohen had used it to restructure OSHA, and then Eula brought me on to work on a number of things, from MRP to Wright to refuse hazardous work. But the one thing, and I served as NACOSH head under her, and many of you will remember I was not very gentle with you. I apologize at this time. I've mellowed in my old age.
No grudges, no grudges.
But I do want to say well, first of all, I'm happy that the IRLG, the Interagency Regulatory Liaison Group, was mentioned, because never since that time have the 8 regulatory agencies spoken with one voice. We didn't do it under Clinton, which makes him the most moderate Republican we've ever had in the White House. Did I say that? Yes. But, we need desperately to speak with one voice. But I only want to tell you one story, which is I was working with Eula and with Grover Wren, who headed the health standards on the cancer policy. And Grover and I got into it. He wanted a much less protective standard. So he said, you damn academics come down here from Cambridge telling us what to do. You know nothing about running the government. And I looked at him and I said, Grover, you can call me any kind of name you want in the world, but don't ever call me an academic. And Eula was there and she just roared and it broke the ice. And we did get a strong cancer standard. Anyway, lovely to see you. I kept up with Eula up until the very end. My communication with her was often. We talked a lot about politics, do things. So I don't feel like I've been out of touch with her, but I have been out of touch with you all. And it's nice to be reconnected. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Nick. Jerry?
So I would say Eula would be delighted that Nick told a story instead of a joke. Sometimes they're a little profane. But I also want to kind of tell us that she had such an amazing presence with each of us who were privileged to have interacted with her. She thought about us. She wanted to promote us. She wanted to drive us to be stronger social justice leaders in all the domains. And she was a bridge builder. And all of us need to think about the many bridges we need to build in this very endangered time in our most worthy nation to be better. We are better than what's being expressed by the current leadership. Science is so much more important than has been acknowledged by this leadership and a whole party. And we have great opportunity on the horizon, and we have to pull together, as she would have encouraged us, pull together to do the right thing, mentor the next generation to do better than we could do, and trust that that ethic and future will be part of a better America. She had that vision. We could be far better than we were letting ourselves be, and we have to gift that to ourselves and the next generation to do a lot better. I'm so grateful for her strong, loving presence and needling to do better than I've ever tried to do. It was done with love, with a sense of compassion, and a sense of confidence that we could do better than we were letting ourselves believe we could. So let's wrap it up with a statement, we're going to do better.
Right on, Jerry. Amen. Hey, Tony Robbins is on. Tony, would you like to say a little something about Eula?
I guess Eula is the person. Am I muted or are you?
No, you're in, Tony. Go.
Good. I mean, Eula, John Freund's and Frank Greer were the ones who originally connected me to Eula, and along with Eula to Dave Obey. And they dragged me out of the depths of public health where I had been hibernating and into the occupational health world. And it was a great adventure, and Eula was always there when I needed her. Why don't I stop?
Thank you, Tony.
Hello, can I say something? Am I on?
Please, you're on. Go for
Peter
it.
Infante. First of all, I would say
Hey,
it's,
Peter.
you know, what a great tribute to just a lovely, not only a great scientist, but a lovely human being, Eula. And it's nice to see people I've interacted with years and decades ago that I haven't really talked to for a long time, including like Nick Ashford, who just went away. But, you know, I want to say this has been tremendous and uplifting. And I agree with Jerry saying that, you know, we need to unite and really need to push things again in these dire times. But the thing I loved about Eula, and I left NIOSH in '78 to go to Osha, hoping that, you know, we could get out some regulation. And we're doing all these research at NIOSH, nothing being done about it. So Joe Wagner and I and Bill Lloyd all left NIOSH and went to Osha. But what I love about Eula is, you know, her motto was, you know, forget the minnows, let's go after the whales. And that's exactly what she did. She went after the exposures, you know, trying to reduce those that would have the biggest impact on worker health, not, you know, some tokenism that, you know, we've seen at times since then. So anyhow, and even, you know, I you know, went there, you know, it was, you know, during the Benzene Standard. I didn't go to, actually, the, was it Fifth Circuit Court already stayed the standard about the time I got to Osha in 1978. And, but, you know, we kept pushing and pushing, you know, Eula's work. And I would tell her, you know, I would call her, because I testify in cases to help workers get compensation that were exposed to benzene, that developed leukemia and lymphomas, and the last one being last Thursday and Friday, and, you know, where the guy, typical, before Eula issued the emergency standard, you know, it being exposed to these solvents that contain high levels of benzene, 30, 50% benzene. People in these industrial facilities were cleaning their clothes, using it as a dry cleaning fluid when they got grease on them, cleaning their clothes with benzene in 1977. So, and I've testified in hundreds of cases of benzene leukemia, and I would call Eula after that and say, Eula, you have no idea how many lives you saved with that emergency standard, because with all the knowledge that was available in '77, even before I did the biofilm study, the exposures in the workplace were just like incredibly high in the uses of benzene still as a solvent in it. So, you know, and I'd say, you know, congratulations to you again. I want you to appreciate what you did. There are so many lives that you have saved from dying from these diseases from benzene exposure. And, you know, Eula should respond with that, well, Peter, you know how when she was all excited, she'd go into her high-pitched voice. And I'll tell you, it just revved my engines to hear her say that again. It was just so wonderful. And, you know, it'd bring tears to my eyes after I got off the phone with her. I'm like, boy, you know, you just gave me some more energy at times when I feel like I'm exhausted after this last testimony. So, you know, she was just such a wonderful woman. I'm glad you you talked about cotton dust and all those horrible things. And in fact, I was at Osha when they confiscated all of those bulletins, and we were writing memos trying to save things, and we were getting in trouble for that. But it was just Eula's idea of let's forget the minnows and go after the whales. And I think that that's part of her legacy, wasn't it? To go after the things that would have a big impact. Not just something that might show that you're doing a little bit of tokenism.
Yeah. Hey, Frank, I tried to really get, I'm sorry, Peter, I tried to get Frank Greer to join us, but I wasn't successful. But again, he's another important part of the story of where, policy, communication, and hell raising and trouble all intersect. Because I remember they shipped all the booklets to all of us, to hide in our attics. I think Eula had one in her attic too, to keep the booklets alive so they wouldn't get shredded.
Yeah, well, the final determination was on that they couldn't destroy government property.
Exactly. Hey, Mike, did you want to say something? Mike Silverstein? Hey.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Just a short story that illustrates kind of the rippling effects that Eula had in a lot of ways that were unanticipated. I was working for the UAW in 1977. And I got a phone call from Dwayne Block, who was the medical director for Ford Motor Company at the time. And Dwayne said, Mike, have you heard anything about this woman who just got appointed to be the assistant secretary? And I said, no, Dwayne, I really don't. I haven't gotten to know her or meet her yet, but I'm sure that we're going to learn together over the next few months. And then I got off the phone and I realized that there was a tone of voice that Dwayne had that made me think, boy, he's nervous about something. And it wasn't until I think it was January 1978 when the lead standard was adopted, and and then I realized what it was that he was nervous about, because that kind of laid the table for us for a whole series of important battles between the UAW and the auto industry for many years to come. And so it's that kind of impact, the rippling impact of all the things that Eula did that are important to remember. So I just wanted to add that brief comment.
Thank you, Mike.
Chip, could I just say something? There's a person whose name has not been mentioned. As I said, I wrote Crisis in the Workplace under the sponsorship of the Ford Foundation. Well, my program officer was Basil Whiting.
Oh, I tried to get him. Nick, I tried to get him to come.
You should have asked me anyway, but I've kept up with him. He became her deputy and was responsible for all these worker training grants. And he shouldn't be forgotten, because he was somebody who really respected Eula, did her bidding, was an organization man. And at a time when we look to government to help us out of our problems, maybe we ought to rethink private philanthropy. Private philanthropy is not all the same. And maybe we need to return to private philanthropy to get some help with these difficult times. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. Yeah, I really tried to get Basil, but I wasn't successful. I was trying to get all the inner circle. I think the first picture I showed, he was in that picture next to John Freund's and Frank Greer. Anyway, I think we're past 2 hours, and I guess I just want to thank everybody. Phil, I don't know if you want to make a last comment, or Carol, my co-conspirators.
Chip, I just want to thank you for this. A special word to Martha, to Helen, to Helen's children. You guys are blessed to have had Eula for your mom and your grandmother. She was an incredible person. She really, I think one of the many names that was given to her in addition to the Wicked Witch was Mother Safety. Remember that one? And she really was. She really was the mother of occupational health and safety. Her caring, loving, incredibly forceful personality, the tough love, the administrative skill, the legacy that she created in really less than 4 years, the time she had. It's quite remarkable, and we're all in her debt. So a final word from the Collegium Ramazzini, of which she served grandly as president. Eula, thank you.
Great. I don't know, Linda or Carol?
Well, I just wanted to add, Chip, a big thank you to you. It's great to see Helen and Martha and the girls and Brett and so many old friends. I think that, this is a great bonding experience and couldn't have been done without you, Chip.
Thank you. Thank you. Carry it on, baby. Carry it on. Got to keep on. Oh, did Linda leave? Oh, darn. I was going to try to get Linda to talk. Allerding. No, she left. Okay. Anyway, I think it's over.
How about a big round of applause for Chip for organizing? Zoom.
Thank you.
This is my life. What can I say? Follow me, Digital Chip, @DigitalChip on Twitter. Okay. Anyway, thank you guys. Appreciate it. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks everybody. Nice to see you.
Thanks from all the small communities too.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.